everyone, and welcome to this month's educational webinar entitled Conquering Cholesterol. As always, this is Gary Sams, the Chief Wellness Officer for Ebix Benefits Administration and Wellness. And this month we have Michael Wisdom, one of our longtime health and wellness coaches, with us to discuss this important topic. Before I turn it over to Michael, as we're recording this presentation for September, it's very timely in that September is actually National Cholesterol Education Month. And we want to start with a few stats just to kind of get us started. Did you know that, for example, more than 35 million Americans have total cholesterol levels of 240 or higher? So it's quite a significant number of our fellow citizens that have this challenge of high cholesterol. High cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease and stroke, causing about 2.6 million deaths in the US each year. And far from it just being something that adults and older folks have to be concerned about, actually individuals that have a condition called hypercholesterolemia, which can be genetic and familial, it's an issue for children as well. 7% of US children and adolescents ages 6 to 19 have high cholesterol. So it's something that we all need to be aware of, what it is, what the risk factors are, and what we can do to really reduce our cholesterol levels. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Gary, for that introduction. My name is Michael Wisdom. I'm a health and wellness coach here at Ebix. I'm going to talk to you today about cholesterol. So hopefully you can better understand those things that our physician talks to us about when we go in annually and they show us the numbers and they say good, bad, or otherwise. The more we understand these things, the more proactive we can be with our health. So with that in mind, I'll dive into some cholesterol here. So just in general, cholesterol is a waxy substance found in your blood. Your body needs cholesterol. It's important to help to build the healthy cells, but high levels of cholesterol can increase your risk of heart disease. High cholesterol may increase the risk of developing fatty deposits or plaque buildups in your blood vessels, and leading to increased risks of a stroke and heart attack. And there's a lot of things that control it. There's a lot of things that affect how much cholesterol we have in our blood. So diet and exercise are two main factors that we think about as controllable variables for this that can help to improve or worsen the condition. And tobacco exposure, first and secondhand smoke, can both have a negative impact on cholesterol. Body weight, being overweight or obese, those things can negatively impact cholesterol. Same with just simple improvements of body weight can help to improve that cholesterol. There can be some hereditary factors that are associated with high cholesterol, and those are things that you want to keep an eye on in your family history so you understand the risks associated with just kind of in your background. It's important that we know our numbers. Your doctor's going to review those numbers with you whenever you go in for a blood test, annual screening, lipid panel, and they're going to tell you, here's what those numbers are. It's important that we know what the norm is, what we're aiming for, and what those numbers are representing. Because high cholesterol, it's not something that has symptoms. You're not going to feel it. You're only going to be able to see those risk factors represented in that lipid panel to help to show you that there's a risk lingering. And what we'd like to see from those readings, we'd like to see your total cholesterol less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. So that's just telling you the concentration of cholesterol within your blood, right? How much is lingering in there, and in having an increased risk for it to do something we don't want it to, right? So because cholesterol, it's carried through your blood and it's attached to proteins. In this combination of protein and cholesterol, it's called a lipoprotein. And there's different types of lipoproteins, right? So when we think about the total cholesterol is representing, it's a composite of different measurements, including that bad cholesterol, LDL, along with the good cholesterol, the HDL, and 20% of your triglyceride level. So that's what that's telling you is how much of that total is represented in that blood concentration. That we're aiming for below 200. And then when we look at more specifically those other two, the LDL and the HDL. The LDL, that's the bad cholesterol. And that's transported throughout your body. And the concern with LDL is in high concentrations, it has a greater opportunity to build on the walls of your arteries, making them harder and more narrow over time, leading to those issues like strokes and heart attacks. So we want to see that represented on that lipid panel. We want to see that below 100 milligrams per deciliter. And that bad stuff, that's the stuff that we want to try to keep an eye on, associated with the diet and the exercise and things of that nature. The fatty foods is how we're going to try to control that LDL. The HDL on the flip side, that's the good cholesterol. We love the higher the better on this one. We'd like to see that above 60 milligrams per deciliter. Okay, so we think about that good cholesterol as what it's doing is it's picking up that excess cholesterol as it moves through the blood vessels, and it's taking it back to your liver. So it's essentially sweeping it up and keeping things moving. So that's why it's equally important to keep an eye on that HDL. We don't want to see that one sneak down on us because it doesn't give us as much opportunity over time to rid some of those things that might otherwise be building up if that HDL level drops down too low. And that one's going to be controlled again by diet and exercise as well, to a pretty good degree. So that's where we're going to emphasize, things that are high in fiber or healthy fats like fish or the plant-derived fats. Things like that can help to make that HDL as robust as we possibly can. So we just want to keep an eye on those numbers over time, and hopefully that'll better represent when you look at those numbers that your physician's giving you, so you can understand those. As I mentioned briefly before, there's many risk factors that you and your physician may look at to keep an eye on controlling that cholesterol. So we think about there's a number of health conditions that affect cholesterol level. Diabetes being one of them, because high blood sugar can contribute to high levels of dangerous cholesterol called VLDL, not dissimilar from LDL. And in the increased blood sugar can also lower your HDL, or that good cholesterol that we discussed. And with that increased blood sugar, it can also damage the lining of your arteries over time, compounding those things and making it more susceptible to holding on to the cholesterol depositing on the walls. And then with obesity, or being overweight, we think about that can increase the risk of high cholesterol. And we see a correlation of a BMI of 30 or greater can have a correlation with an increased risk of high cholesterol. And then there's the hereditary component. So we look at familial hypercholesterolemia. And so we want to know the family history of things. It's important to kind of know, did your mother or father have high cholesterol? Maybe your grandparents. It's important to track those things to understand. Just because we know with a family history of high cholesterol, there's a 5 times higher correlation for risk of coronary heart disease over 30 years. So you want to keep an eye on those risk factors to understand how that can affect over time. And then behaviorally, those are some of the things that we want to keep the biggest eye on, because this is that controllable variable that we're discussing. So a high saturated and trans fat diet is going to affect that rate. right? So saturated fat, we think about as those are going to be the red meats and the full-fat dairy products, fried foods, things of that nature. And the trans fats, we're going to think about those as processed fats. So those are going to be in like the packaged foods, the things that are going to be a little more shelf-stable, fast foods, things like that. So the more we can reduce those types of foods, then we're really going to help ourselves out pretty well there. And then along with that is physical activity. So sedentary lifestyle can certainly have a detrimental effect on the cholesterol. And we know that exercise can help to boost that good cholesterol, and exercise has also been found to help to increase the size of that LDL cholesterol, that bad cholesterol, which makes it less harmful over time. And then behaviorally also, cigarette smoking or tobacco smoking. And again, this could be a heavy saturation of secondhand smoke as well. So we want to be conscious of that if we're living in a household with smokers. Because cigarette smoke over time damages the walls of your blood vessels. So it makes them more rigid, makes them more prone to accumulate fatty deposits. And smoking can also lower that good cholesterol, again, that we keep referring to, the HDL cholesterol. And then as well, with those risk factors, we think about age and gender, right? So over time, our body chemistry changes and our risk of high cholesterol climbs, as well as our liver becomes a little less efficient at removing that LDL cholesterol as it passes back through. So we may see an accumulation of that over time with age. And then gender, we think about men are generally at a greater risk for high cholesterol before the age of 55. And then we see that gap start to narrow. What can we do to continue to improve that cholesterol? If we're dealing with high cholesterol or if we're trying to avoid it, from a dietary standpoint, it can be one of the best controllable variables we have at hand. And the main takeaway when we think about cholesterol is going to be trying to reduce the saturated fats and trying to reduce the trans fats. So it's important to kind of understand what those things are. So saturated fat, you think about that's going to be derived primarily from an animal-derived source. Right? So animal fats like red meats and full-fat dairy products like cheeses or like full-fat milk and things like that, heavy cream. And then some oils can have saturated fat, like tropic oils like palm oil or coconut oil. So we want to be conscious of how much and how often those come into play, just because they're readily available in most foods, and they're very calorically dense. So we'd like to, from a health standpoint, limit our saturated fat to 5 to 6% of our total calories per day. And then along with that, the trans fat, we think about trans fat as a synthesized fat created by adding hydrogen to liquid vegetable oils. It's found in a lot of processed foods, fast foods, and it, because it's a cheap fat to add to those cheaper foods, generally makes them a little more shelf stable, it's more conducive for packaging, and things of that nature. It lends itself for good mouthfeel on those foods. So it's easy to utilize in some of these processed foods. It just doesn't do anything efficiently for us in consumption. So what we'd like to ideally replace that with would be unsaturated fats, right? So unsaturated fats are going to be like plant-derived fats, so nuts, seeds, avocados, olive oil, those things that you might hear people refer to as healthy fats. Right? The more of those things we can emphasize in lieu of the reduction of the trans fats and the saturated fats, those things can have a positive impact, because those healthy fats can help to boost that good cholesterol that we've been talking about, trying to make more robust. And those are things that we just want to emphasize because we don't need to necessarily take away fat. We just want to make sure it's coming from a healthier source, a more natural source, things that our body can utilize efficiently metabolically. And just in general, a healthy diet emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, poultry, fish, nuts, while we're trying to reduce processed things, sugary foods, sugary beverages, things of that nature. If we can do that, we're probably moving in the right direction dietarily. So along with diet, we want to emphasize physical activity or exercise because we know that sedentary lifestyle lowers that good cholesterol, that HDL over time. So we want to get up and move and doing something. And this doesn't mean that we have to take up jogging or get a gym membership or, turn into anything that we haven't otherwise been. It just means getting up moving. American Heart Association would define it as saying, emphasizing 50 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week. So 2.5 hours of something. It could be as simple as walking, swimming, biking, dancing, going to a fitness class, doing yard work. It doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be consistent and getting up and moving. And we can look at that and say, that moderate intensity aerobic activity, we define that as 50 to 60% of your max heart rate, which can sound complicated, but you could, in simpler terms, just use the talk test. So you should be able to talk to others without gasping for air while you're doing that activity. But you should have a little bit of a forced conversation. It should be a little more effort to speak while you're doing it, right? But I can still hold a conversation. So we don't have to be out there huffing and puffing, but just getting out there and trying to get our heart rate up for that sustained period of time. And what we look for is that 2.5 hours doesn't have to come in one foul swoop there for the week, right? What we're looking for is at least 10-minute sustained bouts of those things to accumulate that 2.5 hours for the week. If we can do those few things, that's enough physical activity to move the needle to help to improve the cholesterol. And that's all we're really looking for. So along with diet and exercise, we also look at lifestyle modifications we can make to help improve that cholesterol as well. So if we're smoking, quitting smoking can help to have a positive effect on that cholesterol. So removing that from the mix, because we know what kind of a risk factor it is associated with it now, right? And we know that when we're smoking, it's lowering that good cholesterol, and studies have found that just by quitting smoking, we can help to lower that bad cholesterol over time as well. And then losing weight. So just bringing the body weight down can have a positive effect on cholesterol. So as discussed already, being overweight and obese can be a risk factor. It tends to raise the bad cholesterol and lower the good cholesterol. A simple weight loss as little as 10% can help to improve cholesterol numbers. So it doesn't take a whole lot, right? It's just getting moving. And those behavioral modifications that we talked about from diet and exercise are the same things that would help to spur on weight loss. So things kind of moving in the same direction and helping to improve that cholesterol over time. Covered a lot of information about cholesterol. It's important to find the right resources. We've listed a few in this slide for you to continue to learn about the subject. Thank you for your time and attention today. Hopefully we've been able to provide a little more information for you to better understand cholesterol and how to manage your potential risks moving forward.